Meet your monsters. We can start off today by looking through a copy of the book for inspiration of different monsters which I've drawn in the past. Or if you have ideas for your own type of monster, go ahead and go with those. And for those of you that did not get a copy of the book, you can just watch along with the video. And so in our packets, or if you don't have a packet, you can use just a piece of paper, and what we have is coloring pencils and a regular pencil. The video is sort of sped up, so you don't really have to keep up with me. Just follow along as you can and make your own monster and meet your own monster. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm starting off by drawing lightly with a yellow colored pencil. Now, if you have a regular pencil that can be erased, that may work better for you, but in this case, I decided to experiment with something kind of new. And instead of using a pencil and erasing like I normally would do, I just started off with the colored pencil. Now, colored pencils can be somewhat difficult to erase, so it's important to start with a light colored pencil if you're going to do that, because you have to be able to somewhat be able to go over it. So in this monster that I'm drawing, I'm thinking about what I want to address. So as these projects come along, they're really about expressing ourselves and expressing the things within ourselves that are sometimes difficult to express, such as anxiety or depression, or sometimes unhealthy to express, such as anger or frustration. And so what I do is I think of things that represent those things. So in this lesson, I'm giving an overview of really what self-expression is. And to me, self-expression is the coming forth and coming out of our feelings, the things that we're feeling internally, and how can we externalize those so that we can better understand them and also communicate better to other people. So in the case of this drawing, what I came up with was just a series of shapes, which I then began adding different features to, such as eyeballs, mouths, hands, and a nose. And what I do is after I have colored or sketched the drawing with the light color, I then start coming in and coloring it with the colored pencils and adding the colors which I want, such as adding red to the mouth and to the lips, and redefining my original sketch so that I can make it as detailed as I want it to be. Now, these drawings don't necessarily have to be detailed. They don't have to find any sort of perfection or any sort of form, because the idea of it is really just to get the ideas out. It doesn't have to take a particular form or be necessarily pretty or aesthetically pleasing, because after all, they are our monsters, so they don't really need to have any sort of confinement to them, because they can be whatever we want them to be and whatever we need them to be. And as I color, I color lightly at first always. I always start lightly and then add the darkness afterwards. That way I can have better control over any mistakes that I make. And like I said, like the colored pencils can be rather difficult to erase. So I tend to, especially with drawing with colored pencils, I start very lightly and then add in the darkness. And that carries over to a lot of different forms of art that I do. I tend to start light and then go heavier and heavier and heavier so that the mistakes are easier to fix. And also when I'm drawing, I tend to go, I start with the biggest things and then refine them down, such as I didn't want to start with an eyeball and then build around it. I started by drawing the whole shape of the whole body and then began to add in the details and the different aspects of the drawing, such as the eyeballs, which I'm drawing now, and the refining of the different skills. Now, you can always reference monsters and just copy them and put your own meaning towards them. They don't always have to be from your imagination, though I tend to want them to come from the imagination myself, because I'm addressing topics that are within my imagination. So as I move further along, I just add more and more details, such as adding the colors of the eyes, the pupils of the eyes, the various textures and shapes that I'm trying to pull forth out of this monster so that it takes shape. And I can use as many tools or as few tools as I'd like. It doesn't have to be colored. It can all just be with one pencil. It can be all in just one color. There's really no rules or right or wrong ways to do this. The important thing is that you do the work, and while you're doing the work, you contemplate what you're trying to express with the work. Now, in Meet Your Monsters, it's about addressing the topics within ourselves, which are a little harder to talk about, like our fears and our anxieties and our depressions and the things that we don't always bring forth and discuss. But and when we start to look at those things, we can have an infinite wellspring of inspiration, because all of us as human beings go through those things, such as sadness and anger and frustration. Like they're natural human responses, but the ways that we are bringing them forth isn't always healthy. Such as if you're angry and you choose to hurt somebody, that's not good. But if you're angry and you choose to turn it into a drawing and process it and begin to gain a deeper understanding of why you're angry, then these processes can be really healthy. And art's a very healthy way to process these various emotions and feelings that we go through in life. And so now that I've got my shape in of the drawing and I've added the details that I want, like the various ears, the eyes, and the mouth. And the reason I chose that is because I feel as if a lot of the times our feelings are being influenced by external influences, such as the things that we hear, the things that we see, the things that we physically touch, and our environments, and all of the various factors that make up our life experience. Those things all come into play into what is affecting our mental health. And with this drawing, with this book, with this program and course, I really aim to teach people how to mimic my technique of addressing these issues, and give forth tools which give us opportunities to deeper and better express ourselves. And this is just one example, with drawing monsters, because it's easy to address those issues and make a monster out of the things that we don't want to look at, because what are monsters except for maybe the things that we avoid and the things that we want to hide from. And by making a drawing out of these things, we're able to maybe not heal the things that are causing those, but we can start to work towards addressing those issues and maybe better seek help and find better ways to work through these issues and better ways to communicate these issues. And in these drawings, that's what they're really all about, is finding healthy ways of self-expression so that we can better understand ourselves and better understand each other. So after I've filled everything in with the colored pencils lightly, I start to add in the darker lines, such as here. So now I've taken the darker colored pencil and I'm just outlining it, and that'll be a place where some of us want to stop. It makes the whole shape. And some places, in some cases, this is the only thing we want to do, is just make the lines. But for me, I wanted to add as much depth and detail and character to it as possible so that I can spend a little bit more time with it while I'm contemplating the concept of what gives us feelings and what makes us feel a certain way, which is what I was addressing and thinking about while drawing this drawing. And oftentimes drawing can be just a meditation, if you will, and a space where we can contemplate ideas and bring forth our thoughts about ideas. So as I continue to outline this drawing, I'm thinking of the next steps which I'm going to take, which next I'll start to shade it and add a little depth and character to it, such as I'm doing right now. I'm kind of making just some little shadows and adding some highlights and shading. Now, again, if you don't feel comfortable adding shadows, because it's a bit more of an advanced technique, but it's a fun thing to experiment with. And the fun thing about the monsters is they can be ugly and they can be wrong and they can be messed up, because that's what we're doing here, is we're making works of art that aren't perfect, that are representing our more ugly parts, our less perfect parts, if you will. And those are all beautiful and they make up who we are. And they're important to look at those things because they are a part of who we are. They are part of our makeup. And through doing processes such as this, you're able to really begin to gain a deeper understanding of who you are and what you're capable of doing, and ways in which you find self-expression to be beneficial in your life, and then you begin to develop your own style of self-expression and your own means of expressing yourself. And so that's why I add a little bit more detail, because I want to go a little further and I want to understand a little bit more, and not necessarily understanding more about the drawing, but while I take the time to put a little more effort into the drawing, I'm able to put a little bit more effort into gaining a greater understanding of not only how art techniques work, but also about how I am interacting with those techniques and how I'm interacting with the world in general. So I can keep working on these drawings for a really long time and add backgrounds and keep adding shadows and keep adding more and more details and various elements to it, or draw a bunch of monsters, or add lettering, or add text, or add, various different things which can come into it. But for the most part, what I like to do is make a drawing and see where it takes me. Let the drawing kind of dictate the journey, and see how much energy I want to put into it and how much time and effort I'm willing to put forth into this drawing. And that really makes it so the drawing is really special to me, because the drawing later on, when I look at it, it comes to represent that journey that I went through, and that lesson that I learned and came to have a greater understanding of while making the drawing. So it becomes sort of a symbol of learning anytime we make any drawing, and that's what it can be. And when you look back at sketchbooks from years past, or your youth, or whenever you made the books or your drawings, you can all do that time in your life. So now what I'm doing is just kind of adding a little bit more color, kind of just playing around with the colored pencils. And part of art and part of this process is playing around and experimenting and moving past those fears, because after all, what is it? If we're confronting our monsters, we're really facing our fears, and a lot of facing our fears can be just the things that inhibit us, such as I don't know how to draw, or I don't know how to color. Well, the only way you learn how to do it is by doing it, and that's what is most valuable in this process and in this book and in this project. And you don't have to have the book to do this project. You can simply just take a pencil or color pencils and make it happen. And find the final details and refine it down to however you want, and then that becomes your monster. And this was today's understanding of the things that make us have feelings, and this is my understanding of it today. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching.